Okay, I'm back with my second sighting, which was about 1 or 2 weeks after the first sighting, and it was about an hour later. I would say within a half an hour to an hour later of the first sighting. I'm gonna try not to ramble here, but it's not easy when you're trying to describe something that's hard to describe. But I'm gonna try and get through this as quickly as I can. Um, so it was at night, uh, clear skies. I was letting my dogs out to use the bathroom as usual, and I let them out. Stepped outside, was facing west, and I just happened to be looking right where I was supposed to be looking at that split second because I saw a white orb um, ascending rapidly, and then it came to a complete stop, and it was about 4,000 feet, I'm guessing, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. Very low in the sky, and it came straight up and jerked to a stop, and I mean it looked like I was watching a cartoon. I've never seen anything come to a stop that quick. Uh, and So I'm like, let's do the routine again. I walked into the driveway of the house and started backing up until I got to the bedroom window and banged on the bedroom window for my girlfriend to come out. And she knew right away by the tone of my voice, what was going on. And she came outside and she saw the white orb, and that was much bigger than the airplane's landing gear lights. Um, and it didn't look like a man-made light. It looked totally different. Um, it looked like it was a fuzzy light. It wasn't a sharp light like man-made lights are, and it was much bigger. Um, and she's like, "I'm gonna run inside and get a camera," and I'm like, "Okay, go right ahead." And she was going for a video camera, not a cell phone, because her cell phone she had was pretty cheap back then, and I'm guessing it was like a 2009, 2010 model or whatever. It wasn't a flagship model. So she's going for a camcorder. Um, so she goes inside. She goes inside, and I'm looking at this thing, and I'm like, I need to communicate with this thing somehow. I don't have a flashlight. Not that flashlight wouldn't work. It's way too far away. I didn't have a laser pointer. I had nothing, and I had no way to communicate with this thing. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll just try mental telepathy. I mean, what's it gonna hurt? Um, you hear stories about them being telepathic, but I had at 9 miles away, I was like, well, this is obviously, this isn't gonna do anything. Um, I don't know anything about mental telepathy. I'm not telepathic. I've never tried being telepathic. Um, and I'm like, I can try it. It's not going to hurt anything, but they're at least 9 miles out, because I know I'm 9 miles from the beach. I'm 9 miles from the beach, and there's no way that this thing came and took off from the ground, because there's thousands and thousands of people. This is like 9 o'clock at night on a weekday. I'm pretty sure it was a weekday. Could have been a weekend, but it was like 9 o'clock at night, and there's no way this thing launched itself into the sky, from the ground. And so uh, I knew immediately that it came from the ocean, and so I just looked at it and closed my eyes and said, I just told it, I said, you weren't fast enough. You were not fast enough, because I was looking right in that direction when you came out of the water. I got the impression that it didn't want to be seen exiting the water. You know, I could be wrong, but that's just the impression that I got, by the speed at which, it didn't have to. There was no reason for it to come out of the water that fast, um, but it did. And if I wouldn't have been looking in that exact direction, I would have never seen it. I would have never seen it come out of the water. So I basically just closed my eyes and looked at it, and that's what I said. I said, you weren't fast enough, basically. And as soon as I did that, the object that was sitting in a hover, from 9 miles out, um, came straight at me, like it was riding a laser beam. And I could see it begin to approach. And so I just counted off in my head, 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000. And before I could get to 4, it had gradually and gracefully came to a stop directly over my head. Um, and it covered the 9 miles before I could count to 4. And it also gradually descended as it was approaching. So by the time it reached me, it was about 250 to 350 feet, roughly. It was really close. I could see the light. I could see the orb, the light, in great detail. And it was at least, I would say it was as big as a 3-story house. Completely silent. Directly over my head. I had my neck back as far as it would go. Um, I was in the front yard, the very front edge of my yard, at the time that it stopped. I was at the edge of the sidewalk, and I was jumping up and down, waving my arms, like a crazy person. I was trying to get it to come down lower, to descend, um, but it didn't. It stayed put directly over my head. It made no attempts to communicate with me telepathically, or any other method. So I just stood there, jumping up and down, looking at it, for about almost 4 minutes, trying to get it to come down. There wasn't anybody else on the street. I don't know. For some reason, my street was completely empty of cars, people, noise. Um, you name it, it was completely silent on the street. No cars, no people, which was uh, which was weird. Um, I didn't think about it at the time, but afterwards I was like, that's very strange that you know there were no cars or people, and um, and so I was the only one out there, and my dogs were out there, and they had not a clue what was above their heads. They did not react to it in the least. They didn't. They never. They had no idea it was there. They just did what they were doing, and they had no clue it was there because it was completely silent, and it didn't. It didn't shine light on the ground. It was self-illuminated, but it didn't shine light on the ground. And what I saw from 250 feet away was a boiling, roiling cloud of plasma that was furiously, boiling and collapsing, expanding out and collapsing in on itself and holding a tight sphere. It was holding a tight shape, but it looked like you're looking at the sun through a filter. And that's what it reminded me of, looking at the sun through a filter and through a special lens that allows you to look at it. And or looking at a pot of boiling water. Except, if you look at a pot of boiling water, that's, another. It looked like that, but it wasn't water. It was clouds. It was clouds, and it looked like clouds, but it was plasma. It was self-illuminated, and it was white. It wasn't harsh on the eyes though. Um, it wasn't like looking into a flashlight. Uh, it looked like it was just a fuzzy white, but it wasn't fuzzy. It was just it was in, you could see it in perfect detail. And on the edge of this sphere were tiny little arms of plasma. About uh, every 10 degrees of this sphere, there was a little arm of plasma, and that arm of plasma stuck up, and then it stuck up a few feet or whatever, and it was immediately laid flat by some kind of force, whatever is keeping this thing in the air. This plasma would bleed off the main body of the sphere, and it would be straight up for a foot or 2 feet or whatever, and then you could see it go completely flat, like um, uh, like a corn of stalk, corn of stalk that's been laid down. And every 10 degrees on this sphere was a little arm of plasma, equally every 10 degrees, equally spaced out. And they were all laid flat in the same direction around the sphere. And I was just like, something was flattening these, was flattening these, whatever force was holding this thing in the air was flattening these these arms of plasma that were every 10 degrees on this sphere. So I saw about 36 little arms of plasma, and they were all laid flat in the same direction. And I was just like, I was just trying to make sense of what I was looking at. And so I was trying to make sense of what I was looking at. At the same time, I was jumping up and down like a crazed monkey. And I was looking at it at the same time in awe. And somebody pulled up in a car, and this guy got out of the car, And as soon as he got out of the car, um, as soon as he got out of the car, this orb, classic metallic discs that I couldn't see because it was covered in plasma, immediately began to back up on the same path that it had approached me on. It started going in reverse, and the guy was out of the car and said, "Is there something wrong with you?" And I said, "No, I'm just out here. I'm just out here jumping up and down, for the heck of it." And as I was talking to him, I was kind of torn between telling him to look up, look up over your head, you know. By the time he had asked me the question, the object wasn't directly over our heads anymore. It was slightly behind him because he had his back to it. It was just a few feet behind him, but it was directly over his head, and it was completely silent. And I was torn between telling him to look up and not telling him, and just letting him get back in his car and drive away. And hopefully the craft would stop its motion, in reverse. I was hoping it would stop, headed back to where it came from. Um, but it didn't. The guy got back in his car. He drove off. Um, the object was moving away as he was pulling away. And then my girlfriend comes out of the house with her camcorder. And by the time she got out of the house, the object was back. Um, the object was back where it was originally, at a minimum of 9 miles out, in the exact same position where it ejected itself out of the ocean. And so she came out, and it's like she had no idea. She did not have a clue what had happened between the time she went in for the camera and the time she came out with the camera. The object was in the exact same position. Um, Basically, the object was in the exact same position as when she went inside for the. So she had no idea what she missed. And she tried to get, I don't know, she messed with the camera or whatever. The thing was back at its 9 mile position, and it started heading north. It started slowly heading north up the coast until I could no longer. It was blocked from my, from our view. And she never got the camera. She never got the camera. She never got the. It was just, she came out too late. By the time she could get the camera set up to record, it was too late. It was outside of our view. And uh, I didn't tell her what she missed. I didn't tell her what she missed. I just, she didn't. She had no idea, and I didn't tell her that night. I told her the next day, but I didn't tell her that night what she missed. And so I went inside, jumped on my computer, reported it to MUFON on their MUFON site. And they're like, okay, we'll get in touch with you by telephone, which would be by telephone, many days later. And so I was like, After I saw the second sighting, I was like, you know what? There's a possibility I could keep seeing these things. I thought after I saw the first one, I thought, well, there's no way I'm not going to live long enough to see another one. Not as long as I not as long as I waited to see the my first sighting. I was like, you know I'm not going to be alive to see the second one because that's how that's how long I had to wait to see the first one. I was like, um, and then I saw the second one, and it was within a few weeks of the first one, and I'm just like, I think there's a chance I could keep seeing these things. And so I started going outside. I started going outside with or without the dogs. It didn't matter, if the dogs didn't. I was going out regardless of whether they went out, and always after dusk. And so I went out the next night. I went out the next night about the same time, just to see what I could see. And I saw this airplane in the sky with this, red and green lights on, and it was way up in the sky. Could have been 40,000 feet, 35,000 feet. It was extremely high, um, much higher than the aircraft normally fly over Los Angeles. But that's not what got my attention. What got my attention was uh, was the fact that it was flying in circles, in giant orbits, and the edge of the orbit would just go over my house. And I've never, you know, I had lived in that same house for um, um, 12 years, and I'd never seen an airplane flying in circles. Um, and so I thought, well, that was kind of, and then these were giant circles too. These weren't tight circles, these were giant orbits. Um, they were giant orbits. And and the plane continued these giant orbits for about 90 minutes. And I stayed outside the entire time watching it fly in circle after circle after circle after circle, very slowly, um, very slow speeds, very big orbit. And then 90 minutes goes by, and it finally broke orbit. It finally broke out of its orbit, and it started heading southeast in a straight line, and it went southeast for a good while in a straight line, and then it made a turn, made a left-hand turn, and started heading due east. So it was like it was over Orange County when it made its turn. Started heading due east, and there was a full moon that night, and that full moon was low in the sky. So it was a very it was a very large full moon, and that plane flew between me and the full moon, and even from that thing being in Orange County, I could clearly see the upside down tail and the propeller on the back of this plane. It had an upside down tail, upside down V tail, and it had a prop on the tail end of the plane, and I knew right away it was an MQ-1 Predator. which is a U.S. Air Force drone, first model, very early model of the Air Force drone. If I'm mistaken, I believe it's the first. It's the first drone the Air Force came out with, and that's the first time I've seen a plane, a drone, anything flying orbits over Los Angeles. And I just thought it was, I don't know, I thought it was, maybe it was coincidence. I don't know, maybe they monitor the MUFON site. But whatever it was expecting something. I was expecting to see something because I was outside at the same time I reported my sighting uh, on a different night, and that's that's the night I saw the drone in the sky. So I don't know. It was looking for something, and so was I because we were both outside at the same time. And so it started heading to the southeast, and then it headed east, and I can't remember the name of it, but there's an Air Force base. There's an Air Force base east of Orange County in the desert. And so I went to I looked up the name of the Air Force base. I can't remember it now, but I went to their website and I started doing a little digging and tried to find the aircraft that were stationed there. And the MQ-1 Predator was stationed there. So that's where it came from. It came from that Air Force base. And that was my second sighting. And I would have 6 sightings after that, into 2014. None of them were worth making a YouTube video on, though. But the next video I make will be of the sighting I had in May of 2021, while I was in my car headed west on a major street. That's really close to where I live, and I was headed west on that street, and I'll make that in my next. I'll tell you about that in my next video, and if I was rambling, I'm sorry to have rambled. It's just hard to get all the details out in one take. Without having to stop the recording and start it and stop it and start it. I'm gonna try and find a way to get rid of the dead space between my sentences, so these videos are not so long. But thank you for listening, and I'll be back with the next one.